Chapter 5 Footprints of Emptiness. The birth of Zen Buddhism. Towards the end of the 8th century, the term Zen school was used for the first time. Before this, the term Lengjia Shung, Shungjian Shung, Tama Shung, Hoso Shung, New Tao Shung, etc. were used. All these terms representing Buddhist traditions that consider sitting meditation to be the core practice and basis of Buddhism. In the middle of the 5th century, the Indian monk Gunabhadra 294-468 translated the Lankavatara Sutta into Chinese. His disciples and their friends organized 30 sections of the text and formed a school called Lengchong Tung, Lankavatara School. The Lankavatara is generally considered a basic text for Zen Buddhism. In the 7th century, a Chinese monk named Tao Xin founded a monastery dedicated to the practice of meditation on Mount Zhongshan at Hunan. One of his disciples, Hung Chen, continued his work and taught the practice of Zen to certain disciples, including such celebrated monks as Shen Xiu, Hui Neng, and Fa Zhong. Shen Xiu later taught in the north of the country and Hui Neng in the south. Fa Zhong, 594-647, remained at the monastery Jiaoxi on the mountain of New Shao at Nanking. Zen started to break up with the Xingtao Amidaism. According to the most authorities, Fa Zhong 594-647 is considered to be the founder of the New Shao sect, but in fact he was neither the disciple of Tao Xin nor the founder of the sect in question. The tradition founded by Tao Xin and Hung Zhen is called the Zhongshan sect. Both taught in the monastery on Zhongshan mountain. Shen Xiu founded the northern school, Peishun. It was in this school that the use of the koans was started. Xiu Neng founded the southern school, Nangshun, but in effect it was his disciple Shen Hui 668-760 who was the true founder. Most of the historical documents of the Chinese Zen Buddhism arise from this school. It is also the southern school that developed the notion of sudden enlightenment, while the northern school embraced the doctrine of gradual enlightenment. To assure the grandeur and prestige of the southern school, Shen Xiu felt it necessary to establish a history of the tradition of Zen Buddhism. Using available facts, he retraced the lineage of Indian Buddhism with its 28 ancestors from the Buddha and Mahakasyapa to Bodhidharma, the first ancestor of the Zen school in China. After him, the mind seal was transmitted to Hui Ko, then to Sheng Shang, Tao Xin, Hung Zhen, and Hui Neng. According to Zen Hui, Hui Neng is the 6th ancestor of the Zen school. Zen Hui himself is considered the legitimate successor of Huineng. The historical document of Zen furnished by the Southern School aimed at consolidating the prestige of this school and therefore don't reflect the entire truth, especially concerning the Northern School. Zen Hui attacked the Northern School while the latter was in vogue because the idea of gradual enlightenment preached by the school was taken up enthusiastically by the aristocracy and the courtier. At this time, the expression Zen school was not yet used, but rather the traditional appellation Bodhidharma school, Tamashung. At the same time in New Shao, the monk Huan Shao, 668-752 was exploring the doctrine of no words and letter. This doctrine, as well as the use of the koans started by the Northern School, was to affect the development of all Zen sects in future generations. When the Northern School started to decline, the Southern School experienced a rapid development. After Shen Hui, great monk like Shixian 790, Tao Zi 707, 786, and Fakin 714, 792 appeared, and the five famous schools of Zen, Linqi, Shaotung, Sunmen, Kuai Yang, and Fa Zen were founded. These schools were later introduced in Japan and Vietnam, particularly the Linqi and Taoshun school. After Shen Hui, the tradition was called the Horseshoe School after the place of Shen Hui lived. The expression Zen School, Chan Shung, appeared at the time of Po Chang, 720-814. The author of the famous Zen monastic rules called Po Chang Xin Kuai. These were the rules by which the Zen tradition separated itself completely from the monastery of the Vinaya school. Zen derives from a form of Buddhism that arose in a geographic zone influenced by Chinese culture. The Chinese Zen tree, transplanted in Japan, Vietnam, and Korea, has grown wild and flourished. Zen Buddhism in each of these countries differ with certain nuances from the practiced in China, but one can easily recognize its identity. Zen and the West. Many scholars, monks, artists, popularizers, and lay practitioners have worked to transplant Zen into Europe and America. Have these efforts proved successful? From the standpoint of knowledge, scholars including Suzuki, Edward Consul, Richard Robinson, and Robert Thurman have contributed a great deal toward arousing the interest of Westerners in Buddhism. Zen has influenced the thinking of theologians like Paul Tillich and philosophers like Erich Fromm and Carl Jung. Does Zen exist yet in the West as a living condition? Many monks, nuns, and lay teachers are offering the practice of Zen there, but to me, much of the practice remains oriental, foreign to Western culture. The process of Zen finding roots in Western soil is an ongoing one. Cultural, economic, and psychological conditions are different in the West. One cannot become a practitioner of Zen just by imitating the way of eating, sitting, or dressing of Chinese or Japanese practitioners. Zen is life. Zen doesn't imitate. If Zen is to fully take root in the West, it must acquire a Western form different from Oriental Zen. Zen and China. There are important differences between Indian mentality and Chinese mentality that gave birth in China to the form of Buddhism called Zen. The Chinese are very practical people. Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism reflect this. The declaration made by Bodhidharma on his arrival in China has become the foundation of the Zen Buddhist tradition, because this declaration corresponds so well to the pragmatic nature of the Chinese. Indian world of ideas and images, such as those revealed in the Avatamsaka, Sadama, Pudarika, Vimalakitinidarsha, and other sutras have no equivalent in China. Perhaps this tendency toward dreaming and speculation was one of the causes of the decline of Indian Buddhism at the beginning of the 8th century. Buddhism, which is founded on human experience and not on speculation, cannot exist without returning to concrete spiritual experience as its base. The Chinese did study and understand the fantastic world of ideas and images of Indian Mahayana Buddhism. In fact, they translated, commented upon, and systematized all the literacy source of Indian Buddhism. But their practical nature attracted them particularly to the experiential base of Buddhism, and it was this that permitted Buddhism to become firmly established on Chinese soil. Zen is the Chinese form of Buddhism. It reflects entirely the spirit and splendor of Indian Buddhism from its inception to its full development. From reason, we can say that Zen brings to us the authentic spirit of Buddhism. The experiential and pragmatic nature of Zen, its attitude vis-a-vis words and concepts, are witness to this authenticity. The Buddha in the Avatamsaka, Shingon, and Tran Thai set is represented allegorically. In Zen, the Buddha is represented as a human being of flesh and bones. Master Lin Chi said, "If the Buddha is immortal, why did he have to die between two salad trees in the forest of Kusinagara? Where is he now? The Buddha, just like us, must obey the law of birth and death. You say that Buddha possesses miraculous powers, but the Asuras, the Brahma, possess these miraculous powers too. Are they Buddhas? The miraculous powers of Buddha allow him to be free of form when he enters the world of form, free of sound when he enters the world of sound, free of smell when he enters the world of smell, free of taste when he enters the world of taste, free of perceptions when he entered the world of perception, free of thought when he entered the world of thought. To acquire the six miraculous powers is to understand the nature of emptiness of the six sense fields. Although he is there in his body of five aggregates, he walks on the earth using these miraculous powers. Although different from Indian Buddhism in form and practice, in the end, Zen seemed to be more authentic than many other Buddhist schools. In particular, Zen emphasizes the necessity of practice leading toward enlightenment, which is the very foundation of Buddhism. As we know, the principle of not-self is used not only as a means to open the way to Buddhism. It is not a dogma. The principle of not-self is applied to both the world of living being and the world of inanimate things. Not-self signifies absence of permanent identity. Not-self is impermanence itself. Everything is constantly changing. Therefore, nothing can be fixed in its identity. Everything is subject to not-self. The notion of emptiness. The notion of emptiness, shunyata, in Buddhism is derived from the notion of not-self. We must always ask, empty of what? Emptiness here means empty of separate, independent entity called a self, but empty of a separate self means full of everything. Let us look at this passage from the Samyutta Nikaya. Lord, why is the world called empty? It is because in the world, a separate self and things possessing a separate self do not exist. What are the things that do not have a separate self? Eye, form, and sight do not possess a separate self, nor that which belongs to a separate self. In the same way, ear, nose, tongue, body, thought, their object, and their knowledge do not possess a separate self either, nor that which belong to a separate self. All phenomena, physical, psychological, physiological, are devoid of a permanent identity. To be empty is not to be non-existent. It is to be without a permanent identity. To illustrate this point, Nagayuna, in his Mahapraya Paramita Shastra, 2nd century, said, "Is it due to emptiness that all phenomena exist? There is nothing ambiguous in this declaration. If things are considered in the light of impermanence and not self, it is impossible that they should be permanent or with an absolute identity. Existence could be impossible if things were not empty of an absolute self. If they were not impermanent, how could a grain of coin grow into an ear of coin? How could your little girl grow up into a beautiful young lady? How could totalitarian regimes even come to an end? To affirm that there is an absolute identity is to define the existence of things, while the proclamation of the principle of not-self is an affirmation of life. Things are possible only when they are devoid of a fixed identity. This can be expressed in these formulas. Impermanence equal not self equal things exist. Permanence equal fixed equal nothing exists. Identity. The notion of emptiness, according to Buddha, is therefore the affirmation of the existence of things and not their negation. Our desire for a world in which things are permanent and indestructible is neither realizable nor desirable. Complementary notions. The early school of Buddhism, such as the Sarvātivāda, Sautrantika, and Theravada, have, for this reason, established philosophical systems that aim at demonstrating that things with permanent identities don't exist, while things, dhammas, that are devoid of absolute identity do exist. However, to avoid confusion between identity and existence, these schools teach that things exist only in the present moment. These schools, particularly the Sarvātivāda, study and analyze physical, physiological, and psychological phenomena, and also phenomena that cannot be classified in these three categories. Work devoted to these studies and analysis are numerous. The fear of nothingness, brought about by misunderstanding of the doctrine of not-self, gave rise to the need to confirm the existence of things, but in proclaiming that things exist only in the present moment, some difficulties have been created. How can we explain karma, rebirth, and enlightenment, for example, if we cannot establish the relation between things that exist in the present moment and things that exist in the past and will exist in the future? The early Buddhist school developed other ideas to complete their doctrine. In the Sarvātivāda school, for example, it is taught that from the standpoint of the noumena, things exist in the past, present, and future, but from the standpoint of phenomena, things exist only in the present moment. The formula identity doesn't exist, things exist is not complete by the formula. The true nature of things exists in a continuous way through the past, present, and future. The Theravada school used the notion of attainment to establish the relation of cause and effect between things. The Sautrantika school uses the notion of seed, biyas, perfumation or habit energy, pasana, and lineage, gotra. The Sarvātivāda school teaches the pluralist realist doctrine, a sort of pan-realism, and devotes its time to study and analysis of ideas about dharmas. Anti-scholastic reactions. Reacting against these scholastic and dogmatic tendencies, new schools and doctrines arose. In the middle of the 4th century BC, the Mahasanghika school again poses the problem of knowledge. It emphasized the importance of purifying the mind in order to realize enlightenment, showing the futility of study and analysis of Dharma. The school encouraged direct spiritual experience. The Bhugalavada school, originating at the beginning of the 3rd century BC, proclaimed that the self itself and the point of view of the Thavira school concerning notion of not self is contrary to the spirit of Buddhism. Although commended as heretical by many, the Bhugalavada were able to demonstrate many errors committed within the scholastic and dogmatic tendency of tradition. Of the 250,000 Buddhist monks in India at that time, nearly 1/4 were Bhugalavadin monks. The 2nd century BC saw the appearance of the first Paramita Sutta text and the rise of the doctrine of emptiness in an effort aimed at regaining the original spirit of Buddhism. The Paramita text, as well as other Mahayana texts such as the Shatthama Pundarika, Lankavatara, Mahaparinirvana, and Avatamsaka, continued to appear in the following century. The explorations made by the Mahasanghika school and by the Bhugalavada contributed much to the appearance of these Mahayana schools. To see the characteristic of Zen better, we must examine the essential trait of the Shunyatavada school and the Vijnanavada school. The Shunyatavada school, known later as Madhyamika, is founded on the Payana Paramita scripture, while the Vijnanavada school is based on the Sandinimokana, Lankavatara, and other texts. These texts are all used in the Zen tradition. To me, Zen Buddhism reflects the essence of all these Mahayana scriptures in a most harmonious way. Return to the source. The point of departure of Payana Paramita thought is the notion of emptiness. In the beginning, as we know, the word emptiness signified the absence of the permanent self. When the Sarvastivada school declared that from the phenomenal point of view, things do not exist as permanent identity, but that the true nature of things exists from the ontological standpoint, it can be said that this permanent identity of things become distinguished as an ontological entity. The Pranayana Paramita explain, things don't have their own nature. The ontological entity of things doesn't exist. The Payana Paramita, through this declaration, brings us back to the source of Buddhism. The notion of impermanence, not self, interbeing, and emptiness are meant at revealing the error of knowledge rather than at giving a description of the object of knowledge. These notions must be considered as method and not as information. According to the Vairagshadika Payana Paramita, this is the most important problem of all. The Buddha said to Subhuti, who asked him what was the method to attain correct understanding. This is how the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas master their thinking. However, many species of living beings there are, whether born from eggs, from the womb, from moisture, or spontaneously, whether they have form or don't have form, whether they have perception or don't have perception, or whether it cannot be said of them that they have perception or they don't have perception. We must lead all these beings to the ultimate nirvana so that they can be liberated. And when this innumerable, immeasurable, infinite number of beings has become liberated, we don't, in truth, think a single being has been liberated. Why is this so? If Subhuti, a Bodhisattva, hold on to the idea that a self, a person, a living being, or lifespan exists, that person is not an authentic Bodhisattva. Why are ideas of the source of error must be corrected? Because the idea is not reality. To lead all being to nirvana is reality itself, but to lead all beings, nirvana, the bringer, and the brought are only concepts. And why is there such a great distance between reality and the concept? In reality itself, there is no discrimination, but in the world of concept, reality is full of discriminations, subjects versus objects, self versus not self, etc. This is not truly reality, but an erroneous image of reality. The origin of this erroneous image is called discrimination or imagination, vikalpa, in the Vijnana Navadin school. The flower that is near the window is the true flower in its undiscriminated reality. As soon as we discriminate, it is no longer revealed. In its place stands an erroneous image. The word empty, which at first signified the absence of permanent identity, now acquired another meaning. The image created by the concept does not represent any reality. It is imaginary. The A, which is not A, is truly A. In the Vajrakedika Payana Paramita, we find many expressions given in the form. The A, which is not A, is truly A. Let us take these examples. What the Tathagata calls a living being is not in essence a living being. That is why it is called living being. Subhutu, what is called a conception of Dhammas, is not a conception of Dhamma. This is why it is called a conception of Dhammas. This means that reality is only reality when it is not grasped conceptually. What we construct through our concept is not reality. This flower, which is not a concept, is truly a flower. Here again is the rejection of the principle of a permanent self, and of a tendency to see things by means of the go-between of conceptualization. The practitioner of the way must enter into direct contact with reality without allowing concept to separate him from this reality. Reality cannot be conceived, nor can it be described in words. Reality is reality. It is thus. This is a significance of the word trueness, thusness, tathata. The Payana Paramita begin with this declaration. There is no true nature. There is no permanent self. Emptiness was offered as a mean. When we begin to take it as the reality, we need an antidote. The Maharata Natkuta says, attachment to erroneous views is comparable to a sickness. All erroneous views can be cured. Only attachment to the view of emptiness is incurable. Attachment to the view of being peeled as high as a great mountain are preferable to attachment to non-being. For this reason, true emptiness is identical to the tathata, which is non-discriminated and non-conceptualized reality. Many go too far in seeing emptiness or tathata as the ontological basis of everything. The idea of an ontological entity, as we already know, is the notion of an absolute self in disguise, which is the enemy of the Payana Paramita. All that can be said is that emptiness or tathata is non-conceptualized reality. All concepts about emptiness are the enemies of emptiness. All concepts about the tathata are the enemies of the tathata. To arrive at the reality of emptiness or tathata will be to arrive at the great understanding. Let us read this dialogue in the Astasahariska Payana Paramita. Subhuti. It is truly marvelous that the Tathata can reveal the true nature of things when nothing can be said about this true nature of things. Have I understood you correctly, Lord, when I say that we cannot say anything about these themselves? Buddha. It is true, we cannot speak about things. Subhuti. And things that transcend words, can they grow or diminish? Buddha. No, they cannot. Subhuti. If it is thus, the sixth practice of the paramita cannot progress. How then can the Buddhist Sattva arrive at complete enlightenment? How can we realize complete enlightenment without perfecting the six paramitas? Buddha. Subhuti. Nothing grows or diminishes in the nature of the six paramitas. The Bodhisattva who practices the parameter of generosity, who develops the parameter of generosity, and who practices skillful means never thinks. This parameter of generosity is in the progress of growing or declining. On the contrary, he thinks, the parameter of generosity is nothing other than words. When the Bodhisattva offers something to someone, he offers his whole heart and all the merit of this act as a gift of wisdom to all beings. This offering expresses the method of realization of total generosity. When he practices discipline, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom, he acts in the same way. Subhuti. And what is the complete enlightenment? Buddha. It is tathata. Tathata neither increases nor decreases. If the mind of the Bodhisattva remains at peace in the tathata, the Bodhisattva is close to complete enlightenment. And he can never lose this. Reality transcends words and concepts and doesn't contain the parameters or dhammas. Neither does it increase or decrease. When the Bodhisattva remains in this mind, he is one close to complete enlightenment. Penetrating tathata. The identification of tathata with emptiness is an attempt to prevent people from conceptualizing emptiness. Similarly, the Mahaprayana Paramita Shastra pushed forward the expression non-empty, asunyata. The non-empty is another name for emptiness. And for tathata, the non-empty is treated in the Mahayana Srathopada by Asvaghosha in a very appropriate way. After confirming that the tathata of things cannot be described by word or represented by concept, Asvaghosha states that a method exists by which to penetrate tathata. It consists of following skillfully. According to Asvaghosha, this supposes abandoning our dualistic tendency. When we speak of something, we do not distinguish the subject who speaks from the object spoken of. When we see something, we don't distinguish the subject who we see from the object seen. When we are able to transcend discrimination, we begin to penetrate the world of tathata. Following skillfully, according to Asvaghosha, is to clear a path amid the words and concepts in order to arrive at reality. Words and concepts can be used without allowing ourselves to be taken in by them. In fact, words and concepts can be quite useful and even indispensable. On the level of words and concepts, two forms of tathata can be distinguished: emptiness and non-emptiness. It is because emptiness is not a concept that one calls it true emptiness, and it is because non-emptiness is not a concept either that one calls it true non-emptiness. All of this is designed to combat the concept of emptiness, which is the primary enemy of emptiness. Subject and object. Discrimination between subject and object, a dualistic tendency, is the cause of all error concerning both knowledge and practice. The attitude of the Payana Paramita vis knowledge and method is expressed very clearly in this passage from the Astashaharika Payana Paramita, which can be seen as the true Zen text. Subhuti. How must a Bodhisattva practice in order to see clearly that things don't have their own nature? Buddha. Form must be seen as devoid of the true nature of form. Sensation must be seen as devoid of the true nature of sensation. It is the same concerning the other sense organs and their objects. Subhuti. If things are devoid of true nature, how can the Bodhisattva realize perfect wisdom? Buddha, it is non-realization which is the process of realizing perfect wisdom. Subhuti, why is this realization a non-realization? Buddha, because we cannot conceive wisdom, nor the Bodhisattva who practice wisdom. As we cannot conceive realization, the one who realizes the method of realization, or the means of realization. The realization of wisdom is thereby non-realization in which all speculation is useless. Subhuti, if this is so, how can a beginner realize wisdom? Buddha, from the first moment of awareness, the Bodhisattva must meditate on the inaccessible nature or non-attainability, anapalambla, of things. While practicing the 6 paramitas, the Bodhisattva must say to himself that there is no thing to be attained. Objects doesn't exist, armlessness. In the true knowledge of the reality, the distinction between subject and object, obtaining and obtained, no longer exists. But if armlessness means the sensation of the desire for impermanent things, it could be said that in this case, the desires for liberation or the desire for enlightenment still exist, which is radically opposed to the idea of armlessness in the Payana Paramita and in Zen. Thich Nhat, in the introduction to his translation of Conversation with the Master Sen Hui, speaks of the sudden enlightenment of Zen as being a special product of Chinese Zen Buddhism, which doesn't exist in Indian Buddhism. In my opinion, this isn't correct. The notion of non-attainment in the Payana Paramita was the basis for the doctrine of sudden enlightenment. The passages of the Payana Paramita that we have cited clearly demonstrate this. The 8 negations of Nagayuna. In the 2nd century CE, Nagayuna systemized Prayana Paramita thought. He compiled the Mahaprayana Paramita Sastra and the Madhyamika Sastra and the Dvadasanikaya Sastra. His disciple Aryadeva compiled the Satta Sastra in the same line of thought. Nagayuna's 3 texts later become the foundation of the Mahayana school called Madhyamika in India and Sanlun in China. Kandrakirti was the founder of the Madhyamika in Kisang, that of Sanlun. The method of the Madhyamika demonstrates the absurdity and the uselessness of concepts and aims at showing the reality of emptiness as dealt with by the Payana Paramita. It is not a linguistic philosophy, a simple play of words, or an intellectual exercise. The aim of the Madhyamika is to reduce one concept to absurdity in order to open the door of non-conceptual knowledge. It is not the intention of the Madhyamika to propose a view of reality in order to set it up in opposition to other views of reality, or views according to the Madhyamika are erroneous because the views are not reality. The Madhyamika is, therefore, proposed as a method and not as a doctrine. This makes the Madhyamika the legitimate heir to the Prajna Paramita thought. In his Madhyamika Sastra, Nagayuna proposes the following 8 negations. There is no generation, there is no destruction, there is no continuation, there is no interruption, there is no unity, there is no plurality, there is no arriving, there is no departing. This is the negation of the 8 fundamental concepts through which reality is habitually considered. Other concepts derived from it, such as cause/effect, time/space, subject/object, etc., are also analyzed and finally rejected by Nagayuna as simply products of discriminative knowledge. When speaking of generation, for example, one also speaks of the object generated, but if one goes in search of this object, one doesn't find it. Generation is not possible without an object that is generated. Nothing generates itself, say Nagayuna, because generation as such doesn't exist. To demonstrate this, Nagayuna poses the question, before the effect E is produced as a function of the cause C, does the effect E already exist within the cause C? If we replied case 1, E doesn't exist in C, that the effect E doesn't exist in cause C, Nagayuna demonstrated to us that in this case generation is not possible. Indeed, there is no relation between C and E. If C doesn't exist in E, it is impossible that E should arise from C. A chick cannot be born of a table. A chick is born from an egg. If we reply case 2 that A already exists in C, Nagayuna demonstrates to us that in this case, E has no need of being generated since it already exists. The relation between an egg and a chick is not a relation of cause and effect. It is of becoming and not generation. The concept of generation is thus rendered absurd. In the process of his analysis, the nature of impermanence, not self, and emptiness of what we believe to be the object of generation and of destruction can be seen. The middle way. All concepts are destroyed in the same way by Nagayuna, who takes every precaution necessary to avoid replacing one concept with another. In the process of analyzing the concept generation, for example, the concept becoming and non-production are brought forth. Both these concepts must also succumb to Nagayuna's dialectic. This dialectic aims at combating concepts in such a way that the concepts that are diametrically opposed to them cannot be used. For this reason, it is called the middle way. The term middle doesn't signify a synthesis between opposing concepts such as being and non-being, generation and destruction. It signifies the transcendence of all concepts. The dialectic is also expressed in the principle of two truth, absolute truth, Paramatha Satya, and relative truth, Samriti Satya, in its pure form, presented by an enlightened person. Dialectic is absolute truth. Sized by concepts, it becomes relative truth. To render it absolute once more, it is necessary to take a new step, and if it is still conceptualized, another step must be taken in order to bring it back to its pure original form. Conceptual description, relative truth, being and non-being, being and non-being, neither being nor non-being, neither non-being nor non-being. Non-conceptual description in the dialect of form, absolute truth, non-being, neither being nor being, neither non-being nor non-being, neither non-being nor non-being, etc. According to the principles of the three gates of liberation, negation, therefore, has the role of breaking down a concept to the point where the practitioner comes to rid himself of all discrimination and penetrates undiscriminated reality. Dialectic aims at producing a transforming crisis and not at expounding a truth. In this close relationship between the language and attitude of Zen, Paramita thought and Madhyamika thought can be clearly seen. Zen masters don't use dialectic in the way that Nagayuna does, but their word, acts, and looks also have the function of combating concept, of producing crisis, and of creating conditions that arrive at releasing the vision of reality. If we were to spend our days in the Zen monastery studying Paramita and Madhyamika texts, there could be no enough time to practice Zen. But these texts are available even in the monastery and can be consulted at any time. The Vijnana School. The Vijnana School, which benefits considerably from the researches of the Sarvastivada school and inherits from it to some extent, also deals with the problem of Tathata, as did Paramita thought, but from the phenomenological view. The most fundamental texts of the Vijnana school are the Sandinimukkhana Sutta, which appeared during the middle of the 2nd century, and the Lankavatara Sutta, which appears during the beginning of the 3rd century CE. According to Daisetsu Taitaro Suzuki, the Lankavatara is not a true Vijnana text, but a Zen text. The reason for this, he says, is that it is the only text transmitted by Bodhidharma, the first Zen ancestor, to his disciple Huiko, and further, the text emphasizes the importance of the inner spiritual experience of the Buddha and of reaching enlightenment. But, in fact, nearly all Buddhist texts speak about the spiritual experience and about reaching enlightenment. It cannot be said that Payana Paramita texts are not basis Zen texts. On the contrary, the Vayakadika, Diamond Cutter, and the Hrideya Heart are the two most popular Payana Paramita texts among Zen practitioners. The fact that Bodhidharma optimistic to recall the Lankavatara clarifies only one thing for us. The Lankavatara was the favorite text of Bodhidharma. The Lankavatara can be considered as the basis text for Zen Buddhism, as Suzuki taught, but it is at the same time the basis text of the Vijnanavada school. This demonstrates that there is a close relationship between the Vijnanavada and Zen, just as there is between the Payana Paramita and Zen. Classification of the Dhammas. The Vijnanavada classifies Dhammas, things, into 5 groups. Phenomena of mind, citta, of which there are 8. Phenomena of state of mind, citta sikha, of which there are 51. Physical and physiological phenomena, rupa, of which there are 11. Relational phenomena, citta viprayutasamsaka, of which there are 24. Unconditional phenomena, asankta, of which there are 6. In all, there are 100 dhammas. The last category groups the dhamma under consideration as unconditioned and distinguishes 1. Unconditioned space, i.e., that which is neither created nor destroyed by condition. 2. The unconditioned acquired by enlightenment. 3. The nature of the unconditioned, which has nothing to do with enlightenment. 4. The unconditioned that is freedom from all pleasure and pain. 5. The unconditioned that is the cessation of all thought and sensation. 6. The unconditioned of Tathata. It should be noticed at this point that Tathata is also considered to be a Dhamma. If one call all that can be conceptualized to be a Dhamma, why can Tathata, which transcends all concept, also be considered as a Dhamma? The Vijnanavada replies, Tathata and all other Dhammas cannot be conceptualized. It is only by convention or expediency that one uses these representations. The Timsika Vijnana Paramita of Vasubandhu begins with this declaration concerning these representations. It is because of the presupposed existence of permanent identities and of dhammas that possess this permanent identity that so many diverse representations are manifest. All these representations come from concept knowledge, vijnana, conscious knowledge. Thus, the recognition of 100 dhammas divided into 5 groups is only an acceptance of the presupposition of that dhammas exist. This acceptance serves as a means for the beginning of the exposition of the Vijnanavada doctrine. This already emphasizes the difference between the methodology of Vijnanavada and that of the Sarvastivada. According to Vijnanavada, all sensation, perception, thought, or knowledge is manifested from the stored consciousness, which is called Alayavijnana. In its non-conceptualized nature, Alayavijnana, a tathata or wisdom of the great and perfect mirror. There are all 8 kinds of conscious knowledge, vijnanas, which are classified in 3 categories. 1. Vijnana of knowledge of object, vijnana Tivisaya, which concerns sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell, and the Manovijnana, which is the center of sensations, perceptions, and thought. Vijnana of the activity of thought, manas, center of the discrimination self/not self, and the reflections. Vijnana of the base, alaya, the base of the manifestation of all knowledge, subject, object. The Mahayana Srahopadasata say about the alaya, true mind, ultimate reality, can be seen from 2 sides: the side of birth/death, phenomenal, and the side of true nature, tathata. Phenomena come from the tathata. Phenomena are neither the replica of tathata nor different from it. Alaya means the basis of conversation and manifestation of all the dhammas, i.e. the tathata. All the vijnanas, all sensations, perception, and recognition contain in themselves at the same time their subject and their object of knowledge. When the eye is opposite a flower, one can say that the eye and the flower are dhammas that can exist separately. But when seeing occurs, the subject and object of the seeing exist at the same time in the sensation. The flower isn't the object seen. The object of the seeing is found in the seeing itself and cannot exist independently of the subject of the sensation. This figure shows us that when sensation occurs, the first phase, which is contact between the physiological phenomena, eye, and the physical phenomenal flower, has already passed in order to arrive at the second phase, which is the sensation, seeing. This underlies another difference between the phenomenological style of the Vijnanavada and the Sarvastivada's tendency toward pluralistic realism. Does the image of the flower in the sensation faithfully reflect the flower in reality? This is an important question. The relation between the reality of the flower and the sensation that arises from it is another subject posed by the Vijnanavada. The first point reveals that the world of sensation and of concepts is only the world of vijnana, conscious knowledge. The object of vijnanas is only the object of knowledge. One can then wonder whether the physiological and physical condition according to which the vijnana are produced truly exist at all. The Vijnanavada tells us they exist as an object of alaya, and one can call them the world of reality in itself. The role of alaya is to maintain all the dhammas and to make them appear. Alaya is also defined as savabhiyaka, or the seed. The word alaya implies to conserve and to maintain. Though considered as a vijnana, alaya doesn't function as do the manovijnana or the manas on the discrimination of subject and object, self and not self. In the case of pure sensation, whether the discrimination of subject/object doesn't exist, the world of reality in itself is revealed. This world of reality in itself is tathata, the true nature of alaya. If the vijnanas are separated from the discrimination of subject/object, they become wisdom, jhanas, and perfect revelation of reality in itself. Method of Vijnanavada. Each vijnana consists of three parts: subject, dasanahaga, object, nimittahaga, and true nature, svasamvitiyathaga. Sensation, perception, and thought also possess these three parts. The notion of three parts shows that the Vijnanavada emphasizes the ontological problem. The part called true nature is considered to be the basis of reality. The essence of Vijnana and Tathata. The first two parts are only the manifestation of Tathata. As each drop of water in the ocean is salty, each drama is a manifestation of Tathata. Seeing reality doesn't come about by pinning things down, but by seeing into their true nature. What is the methodology proposed by the Vijnanavada? First of all, the importance of non-duality must be recognized. Things depend on each other in being produced. They don't possess an independent true identity. This is called the interdependent nature, paratantra, of things. All knowledge not based on the principle of paratantra is incorrect. It doesn't reflect reality. Indeed, it carries with it this illusion imagination, which is called vikalpa. Vikalpa cuts reality into separate pieces, giving them its separate identities. Vikalpa discriminates. If vikalpa is destroyed, knowledge becomes pure and able to reveal tathata. Things will then be represented in their thusness. They will reveal the nature of nibbana, perfect reality. Knowledge, being pure, is called wisdom, jnana. In reality, vikalpa, paratantra, and nibbana are only states of knowledge. When knowledge is vikalpa, the object of knowledge is also vikalpa. When knowledge is clarified by the paratantra, the object of knowledge is revealed in its paratantra nature. When knowledge is absolutely pure, the object of knowledge is nibbana. Once again, we see that the subject and object of knowledge are one. Having dealt with these three natures, Vahavas of dramas, the Vijnanavada tell us that the three natures don't truly exist. Take, for example, the Vikalpa nature, illusion, imagination of things. This nature is only a kind of illusory veil through which things are seen. It is the same for the Parantantra and Nibbana natures. As things don't have true identity, they cannot possess any nature. The Vijnanavada therefore establishes the principle of three non-nature, three nisvahavatas, to combat the principle of three natures, which was first established to guide people in the way of the purification of knowledge. This method makes us think of the method of Madhyamika, which uses concepts to destroy concepts. At the same time, it shows that the Vijnanavada is closely connected to the method of Zen, absolute reality, according to Vijnanavada, cannot be described by the three natures or by the three non-natures or by any other concept. This is because it is the Tathata, because it is the absolute truth of the Dhammas, Dhammaman Paramathas. Absolute truth is revealed only by enlightenment. Just like the Payana Paramita in Zen, the Vijnanavada emphasizes the importance of non-attainment in the process of purification of knowledge. Vasubandhu says in his Timsika, as long as the Vijnana doesn't wish to remain in peace in its non-dualistic nature, the roots of discrimination between subject and object are still there, indestructible. When the practitioner places in front of himself something that he considers as the nature of the Vijnana, Timata Vahara, he is still not in the heart of the true nature of Vijnana, because he still distinguishes subject and object. When faced with the object of knowledge, he doesn't consider it as an object of his own realization. The practitioner begins to live in peace in the true nature of Vijnana, because he has rendered the dualistic discrimination immanent. This reality, which can neither be conceived nor obtained, is transcendental wisdom. Alaya as the basis, the true nature of Vijnana, of which Vasubandhu speaks, is none other than Tathata, the illuminating nature of knowledge. In the state of enlightenment, the five Vijnanas of sensation become the wisdom of the miraculous powers. Manovijnana becomes the wisdom of marvelous inspection. Manas become the wisdom of non-discriminating nature, and Alaya become the wisdom of the great and perfect mirror. Zen Buddhism doesn't enter the realm of analysis and discussion as does the Vijnanavada, but it brings out its spirit in a profound way. The notion of alaya can throw a great deal of light on the mechanism of enlightenment in Zen. Alaya is the profound base of life, and the size, while the Manovijnana and the Manas are only reflecting elements, ideas, and concepts. From the phenomenological point of view, alaya is the basis of being and non-being. It conserves and maintains the energies and essences that are manifested in the Dhammas. These energies and essences are called seed, bias, manas, and manoviyana are manifested on the basis of alaya. The root coming from the arrow are thrust into alaya and are called anusaya. The practitioner of meditation on the paratantra, interdependent nature of things, brings about changes at the heart of the alaya, and these changes transform and neutralize the anusaya root. Enlightenment is the fruit of this transformation, called asraya paravati. According to Huyan Shang, the word signifies transformation, paravati, and support, asraya. To transform is not to destroy. To support is here paratantra. Using the principle of paratantra as the basis, one transforms the seed and root of ignorance into seed and root of enlightenment. This transformation doesn't come about only in manas and manoviyana. It comes about in the heart of alaya itself. When alaya is enlightened, manas and manoviyana are also enlightened. To the enlightened person, flowers in glass, mountains and rivers are no longer given as vikarpa images, but are given in the reality they acquired in the wisdom of marvelous inspection. The expression wisdom of non-discriminating nature indicate the ability of an enlightened person to penetrate to the heart of reality itself without being paralyzed by duality. The effort of manoviyana alone don't culminate in enlightenment. In the first place, since the very basis of manoviyana is alaya, a genuine transformation must be realized at the heart of alaya. Second, reality itself is not revealed in manoviyana, which still clings to dualism. For this reason, alaya itself must be put into action in order to transform the seed, bias, and the two attachments, the arrow concerning self, not self, subject, object. Each moment in which manoviyana is enlightened by paratantra and nibbana is the moment of mindfulness, a moment of Zen, in which all vikarpa images are absent. The process of enlightenment. Let us read the following important passage in the Lankavatara Sutra in order to understand clearly the process of enlightenment of Zen and Vijnanavada. Mahamati, the five kinds of Dharma are representations, nimitta, names, nama, discrimination, vikarpa, thusness, tathata, and true wisdom, samyayana. All forms, colors, and images, etc., are called representations, nimitta. From these representation concepts are formed, such as the concept of the base on the model, this is not that, etc. It is this which is called names, nama, conscious knowledge, and its functions, which give rise to these concepts, is called discrimination, vikalpa. These representations and concepts are not true things that can be obtained. They are only the product of discrimination. The true nature of things liberated from this discrimination is called thusness, tathata. Mahamati. These are the characteristics of thirstness, reality, exactitude, ultimate end, true nature, foundation, and non-attainment. The Buddhas and myself have realized and expounded thirstness. All those who are capable of making good use of this exposition in order to penetrate into thirstness can transcend concepts of continuity and discontinuity, get rid of discrimination, imagination, and reach the spiritual experience of self-realization, an experience unknown to philosophers, Ragvakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas. This is called true wisdom, Samyayana. Mahati, the 5 kinds of dhammas that I have just expounded to you imply the essential doctrine of the 3 natures, the Ayaviyanas, and the 2 states of Naramayas, no true identity. Mahamita, you must use your ability to realize these dhammas. Once you have realized them, your mind will be confirmed. Nothing will be able to disturb you. By way of illustration, we can use a circle with C at its center. The circle, perfectly round, symbolizes the reality of Tathata, which reveals only the true non-discriminating and non-dualistic wisdom. In the unenlightened state, however, what we take for our world of reality is only the world of discrimination, Vakaipa, which is manifested on the Tathata basis. In the world of discrimination, subject and object, representation and name are revealed. By penetrating through skillful means, we come back to the world of Tathata and true wisdom. But that doesn't imply the disappearance of the world of phenomena. What disappears is discriminating imagination. The world of phenomena is revealed in true wisdom without being veiled by vikalpa. The world of phenomena is but one with the world of Tathata in the same way that waves cannot be separated from the water. The passage quoted from the Lankavatara now become clearer. The expression of penetration by skillful means makes us think of the Rahopada Shastra, in which Asvaghosha speaks of the effort of penetration by a clever use of words and concepts. In Buddhism, the language of enlightened person aims at expounding the way of realizing Tathata. This language, which has its source in wisdom, the transcend word concept, must, however, use words and concepts. When we reach absolute reality while using this language of words and concepts, we practice what our Lankavatara call penetration by skillful means. Although Zen declares that it is not based on words and concepts, it in fact manipulates words and concepts in order to reveal the reality that transcends words and concept. The master achieves success or failure according to whether his disciple can or cannot penetrate by skillful means. When the master pole is held out to her, if the disciple is attached to the word of her master in the way of vikalpa, the release of enlightenment will be impossible for her. It must be clearly understood that the Zen master may not encourage this disciple to spend their time studying the Madhyamika and Vijnanavada. It isn't because these doctrines contradict Zen. In fact, they can very well illustrate the development of Zen. But Zen is not the study of Zen. Zen is life. Zen is direct contact with reality. The Mahayamika and the Vijnanavada doctrine can explain many things, but they don't put the practitioner in direct contact with living reality. Zen can only be lived and experienced, as Master Tu Trung Thương Si said. This marvelous piece must be played. What is the good of discussing a musical masterpiece? It is the performance that counts.